The world begins in silence. Not the silence of emptiness, the silence of something held too tightly for too long. The kind of silence that collects in the walls of old apartments, in the spaces between brothers who have run out of easy words. Two boys. One small kitchen. A single gas burner struggling against the cold of a Seoul winter that neither of them is dressed for. The older one, maybe 12, maybe 13, his jaw already learning the geometry of stubbornness, stands at the stove with the focused intensity of a surgeon. He is making ramen. He is making it the way their mother used to, before she stopped coming home at a reliable hour. 2 eggs cracked directly into the broth, green onions sliced thin, a half packet of kimchi drained from a jar that is almost empty. The younger boy, 9, gap-toothed, wearing a sweater 3 sizes too large, is watching from the floor. He has made a table out of a cardboard box. He has set it with 2 mismatched bowls like it is a proper dinner, like they are a proper family, like the apartment around them is not evidence of everything their mother cannot manage. Hyung, the younger boy says. His voice is light the way only children's voices can be light, carrying no weight of the future. When I grow up, I'm going to live somewhere warm. The older boy does not look up from the stove. You're going to live wherever the work takes you. That's what you say. I say somewhere warm. A pause. The younger boy rearranges his makeshift table with great seriousness.
Hyung.
Promise me something.
What?
Don't become someone who forgets how to feel. Now the older boy looks up. Something crosses his face, too complicated for a 12-year-old, too old for the body wearing it. He looks at his brother for a long moment. Then he turns back to the stove. He does not make the promise. He wishes years later that he had. The image bleaches to white. The white becomes the cold fluorescent light of a different room entirely. The present tense arrives like a door closing. His name is Kang Junho, and he has not eaten ramen since the night his brother died. This is not a decision he ever consciously made. It is simply a thing that happened, the way many things happen to men like him. Quietly, without ceremony, without a moment he can point to and say, Here is where I changed. Here is where I stopped being someone who could sit on a floor and eat from a cardboard box and feel, briefly, like the world was manageable. He is 38 years old, and he runs the Kang Syndicate from an office on the 43rd floor of a building that carries his family's name on the outside and his fingerprints on everything inside. The office is all glass and dark wood, and the particular kind of minimalism that is only possible when a man has enough money to choose what he looks at. There are no photographs. There are no personal objects. There is a single orchid on the windowsill that his executive secretary replaces every 10 days without being asked, because she has learned that he notices when it starts to die, and something in his face changes in a way she cannot name, but has catalogued precisely. He is at his desk when she arrives at 7:53 in the morning, which is 7 minutes before his first meeting, and exactly when she always arrives. Not because he has required it of her, but because she understands the rhythm of his days the way a musician understands the time signature of a piece she has played 1,000 times. She does not knock. She enters with his schedule on a tablet, his coffee on a tray. Black, no sugar. Always the same temperature because she has learned the exact point at which he'll drink it without setting it aside, and the 3 documents that require his signature before 9 o'clock. Her name is Adaeze Okafor. He has called her Ada since the 3rd day of her employment, when he asked her name again, and she said the full version, and he looked at her steadily and said, I'll call you Ada. And she looked back at him steadily and said, All right, in a tone that made perfectly clear she was agreeing as a matter of professional convenience, and not because he'd asked. He has respected her for it ever since, in the wordless way that men like Kang Junho respect things, by not mentioning it, by simply adjusting. She is 31, Nigerian by birth, Seoul by choice. Though the choice had been complicated by circumstances she does not discuss at work. She has been his executive secretary for 2 years, and in those 2 years she has become, without either of them quite intending it, indispensable. Not because she is warm, she is professional to the point of precision, but because she is exact. She anticipates. She reads the room the way other people read text, fluently and without effort, and she has never once been surprised by what she finds there. Except by him. Sometimes. in small ways that she files away and does not examine. Your 8 o'clock has been pushed to 8:15, she says, setting the coffee at the precise angle she knows he prefers. The Singapore documents need your initials on page 7, not just the signature page. And Director Choi called. He says it's not urgent, but he'd like 15 minutes before noon. Tell Director Choi I have 10 minutes at 11:45. Junho does not look up from the document he is reading. And tell him to have actual numbers, not projections. Noted. Ada makes the notation. She does not leave immediately. This is something she does, a pause, calibrated, that gives him the opportunity to add something without requiring him to chase her down later. He has noticed this. He has never said so. The orchid, he says. She looks at the windowsill. I'll bring a new one Thursday. The one you brought last time was yellow. I prefer white.
A beat.
I know. It was a miscommunication with the supplier. It won't happen again. He looks up then briefly, in a way that is not quite a look, more an acknowledgement. Then he returns to his document. Ada turns and leaves, and neither of them says anything else. And this is, in the particular private language of their professional relationship, a perfectly normal morning. She is at her desk in the outer office when she lets herself notice, for exactly 3 seconds, that she likes working for him. That the precision of his world and the precision of how she navigates it gives her something she cannot articulate, but feels like, not happiness, exactly. More like alignment. The satisfaction of a thing fitting the way it was made to fit. 3 seconds. Then she opens the next task on her list and stops thinking about it. Director Choi comes at 11:45 with a folder instead of numbers. He is 52, lean in the way of men who have survived long enough to grow careful. He has been with the Syndicate since before Junho inherited it, through the father, through the transition, through every quiet restructuring that has happened since. He is loyal, or has always appeared to be, which in Junho's world amounts to the same thing until it doesn't. He sets the folder on the desk. He does not sit until Junho gestures. What is this? Junho says. Not a question. Evidence, Choi says. That you have a problem in your outer office. Junho opens the folder. Inside, financial transfer records, account numbers, timestamps, a paper trail that leads, with uncomfortable clarity, from Syndicate operational funds to an external account registered under the name Adaeze Okafor. The amount is significant. The timing, 3 transfers over 4 months, is precise enough to suggest planning rather than opportunism. Junho reads the documents once. Then again. His expression does not change in the way most men's expressions change. There is no jaw tightening, no flushing, no visible shock. There is simply a quality of stillness that arrives and deepens, like water finding its level. Where did these come from? He says. Our financial team flagged anomalies during the quarterly audit. I had them look deeper. Choi meets his eyes. I'm sorry, Junho. I know she's been with you a long time. 2 years is not a long time, technically. But in the Syndicate, where loyalty is measured in survival, it is longer than many. Junho closes the folder. Leave this with me. Of course. Choi stands. I would suggest moving quickly. If she becomes aware that we know. I said leave it with me. The tone does not rise. It never rises. But something in it changes, a pressure, a weight, and Choi closes his mouth and leaves. Junho sits with the folder for 40 minutes. He does not open it again. He does not need to. He has read it twice, and he has a memory that does not forgive details. He thinks about the way Ada moves through his office, efficient, contained, alert. He thinks about the things she knows because her job requires knowing them, schedules, contacts, the architecture of his day, and therefore certain things about the architecture of his business. He thinks about the fact that he has never had any reason to doubt her. He thinks about how that is also what people say about the ones who are best at the betrayal. At 12:50, he presses the intercom.
Ada.
My office. She enters without the tablet this time. She can read when a summons is not about scheduling. Junho is standing at the window when she comes in, looking out over the city, which is doing what Seoul does in November, which is glittering and cold and completely indifferent to the suffering of individuals. He lets her stand for a moment. She does not fidget. She waits. Then he turns and slides the folder across the desk toward her. She looks at it. She looks at him. She steps forward and opens it. The silence that follows is not the silence of guilt. It is the silence of someone reading something so wrong that their first instinct is to assume they have misunderstood it. Ada reads the documents with the same focused precision she brings to everything, and Junho watches her face, and what he sees there is not the careful blankness of someone who has been caught. It is the wide-eyed, white-edged expression of someone who has been framed and has just understood, reading the frame, exactly how well it was done. "These are not mine," she says. Her voice is level. This impresses him in spite of himself. "The account is registered in your name. An account registered in my name that I have never seen before today." She looks up. Someone opened it. That's what it would appear. That is what happened. Ada. He says her name the way he always does, not unkindly, not warmly, occupying some precise middle ground. The documents are what they are. The documents are manufactured. Her composure cracks now, not into tears, which is not her language, but into something sharper. A kind of controlled fury that she is visibly working to keep controlled. "You know me. You have worked with me for 2 years. You know how I do my job. Does this," she gestures at the folder, "look like something I would do? Leave a paper trail this obvious?" It doesn't. He has thought the same thing. It is tidy in a way that real betrayals rarely are. Real betrayals are messy, improvised, marked by the panic of a person trying to cover their tracks while their hands are shaking. This is clean. This is the work of someone who wanted it found.
He has thought about this.
He has thought about it carefully. And what he has concluded is that whether the documents are manufactured or not, he cannot keep her in this building while he investigates, because if there is 1% chance that she is genuinely compromised, she is a security risk. And because the alternative, publicly believing her over hard documentation, sends a message to the rest of the organization that his loyalty can be bought by a competent secretary and 2 years of excellent coffee. In his world, the optics of trust matter as much as the reality of it. "I believe you believe that," he says. "But I can't operate on belief. The documents exist. Until they're disproven." Disproven by whom? While I'm what, suspended? Fired. Her jaw tightens. "You're making the decision you think you have to make and calling it logic." He does not answer this because she is not entirely wrong. "Effective immediately," he says. "Security will. You look like my daddy." The words come from the doorway. Small, clear, certain. The voice of a child who has not yet learned to be uncertain about the things she observes. Kang Junho turns. She is standing in the doorway in a yellow coat, holding a small backpack shaped like a frog. She is 5 years old, and she is looking at Junho with the focused, fearless attention that very young children bring to things that interest them, the way they have not yet learned to mask their noticing. Ada has gone very still. A different kind of still than before, not the stillness of control, but the stillness of someone watching something they cannot stop.
"Zoe," she says.
Carefully. "I told you to wait with Mrs. Park." "Mrs. Park is on the phone," Zoe says, still looking at Junho. "And I heard your voice." She takes a step into the office. She is not afraid. Children are not afraid of the things adults have learned to be afraid of because they do not yet understand what the fear is for. "You look like my daddy," she says again, to Junho, with great confidence. Junho crouches. It is not a conscious decision. Something in the body makes it before the mind catches up. Something old, something from the part of him that existed before the Syndicate, before the discipline, before he became the kind of man who stands at 43rd floor windows and looks at cities that do not look back. He goes down to the child's level, and he looks at her. She looks back. He sees it immediately. He sees it the way you see something you have been carrying in your peripheral vision and suddenly turn to face, with a shock that is not surprise so much as recognition. The shape of the eyes. The particular angle of the nose. The small, serious mouth. His brother's mouth. His brother's eyes. "What's your name?" he says. His voice is different. Someone listening closely, Ada, who is listening closely, would hear it, a frequency change, small and complete, like a string tuned to a different note. "Zoe," says the child. Then, with the social instincts of someone who has been well raised, "What's yours?"
Junho, he says.
Zoe considers this. That's a good name, she decides. She has the manner of a child who hands out verdicts freely and without irony. "Do you know my daddy? You look the same." Zoe. Ada's voice is quiet now, stripped of everything except something that might be fear. Junho stands. He does not look at Ada yet. He looks at the space in the middle distance where his thoughts are happening, and his face is doing something it does not usually do, which is nothing at all. Not the trained blankness, not the careful neutrality, but a genuine absence of performance. He is simply a man, for a moment, in the unguarded place between one understanding and the next. Then he looks at Ada. Ada looks back at him. In 2 years, they have had 1,000 conversations with their eyes, about schedules, about meetings, about the small adjustments of their professional choreography. This is not one of those conversations. This is something else entirely. This is the look of two people standing on opposite sides of a door that has just opened, neither of them sure whether to step through. "Stand down," Junho says, into the intercom on his desk. "Tell security the secretary and her daughter are guests of mine for the rest of the day." A pause. "And cancel my 2 o'clock. Ada stares at him. "Sit down," he says. Not in order. Closer to a request. From a man who does not make many of those. "Both of you." Zoe, who has been waiting patiently through this entire exchange with the philosophical acceptance of a 5-year-old who has learned that adults sometimes need a moment, climbs immediately into one of the chairs and begins rummaging in her frog backpack for something. She produces a small notebook and a green crayon and begins to draw. Junho and Ada look at her, then at each other. "Tell me," Junho says, "about her father." She does not tell him everything at once. That is not her way. What she tells him first is the shape of it, the outline, the edges, the part that is already public knowledge in the particular ecosystem where these things become public. She was married, briefly, to a Korean Nigerian businessman she met in Lagos when she was 24 and he was visiting on an import deal that took longer than expected. His name was Kang Junho. He was charming in the way of men who have decided to be charming, deliberately, warmly, with a generosity that felt genuine because it was genuine, even if it was also a choice. They dated for 7 months. They married. She moved to Seoul with him. She did not know his family. This is the part that matters, and she watches Junho's face as she says it. She did not know his family. Miho had said, carefully, without lying, the way a person says things when they want to be honest but also want to preserve a version of the world that makes it easier to breathe, that he had a complicated relationship with his brother, that his brother was in business, that it was the kind of business that was better left separate from their life together. She had understood this to mean a family disagreement, an estrangement, the ordinary fractured geography of adult siblings who have grown in different directions. She had not understood it to mean this. She gestures at the office around them. At the 43rd floor, the glass, the city. Junho is listening in the way he does, completely, without interruption, without the small verbal reassurances that most people offer as proof that they are paying attention. He does not need to perform attention. It is simply what he does. He died, Ada says. 14 months into our marriage. An accident, or so they told me. A car accident in the early morning on a road he had no business being on. She pauses. I've never been certain it was an accident. But I was newly pregnant, and I was in a foreign country, and the man who could have helped me understand what had happened was apparently the most feared person in the Seoul criminal world, and I did not know his name. You knew the name Kang, Junho says. I knew the name Kang, and I knew it meant something dangerous. That was enough to know that I should not go looking. She meets his eyes. I'm sorry. I know that sounds like... It sounds correct, he says. You made the right decision. This stops her. She had been prepared for many responses. Not that one. I named her Zoe because Miho liked that name, Ada says quieter now. He used to say if they ever had a daughter. She does not finish the sentence.
She does not need to.
Across the room, Zoe is adding what appears to be a sun to her drawing. She hums to herself, tunelessly, at total peace with the universe. Junho looks at his brother's daughter for a long time. Then he says, The file on you is manufactured. I knew it when I read it. I was going to act on it anyway because, in my position, I can't afford to be sentimental about documentation.
I know, Ada says.
I'm not going to act on it now. I know, Ada says again. They look at each other, and in the space between them something shifts, not toward warmth, not yet, but toward something more fundamental. Toward honesty. The particular honesty of two people who have just placed their real selves into the same room for the first time and found that the room is large enough. I need to know who built that file, Junho says. So do I, Ada says. Zoe looks up from her drawing. I made a house, she announces. With a garden. Do you have a garden, Junho? Junho looks at her. Something moves across his face so quickly Ada almost misses it. A flicker of something undefended. There and gone. No, he says. Zoe nods sagely, as if she has confirmed a suspicion. You should get one. He gives her the use of a company apartment for a week while he works in neutral territory, secure, far enough from syndicate operations that she and Zoe are insulated from whatever is coming. She argues briefly. He uses the tone that ends arguments, and she goes because she is practical and because she has Zoe to think about. Then he begins. The thing about Kang Junho that his enemies consistently underestimate is that his intelligence is not decorative. He is not simply a man who inherited a dangerous organization and managed to keep it by reputation and intimidation. He is a man who understands systems, financial, organizational, human, the way a watchmaker understands the interior of a clock. He sees the gears. He sees where the pressure has been applied and where the mechanism has been worn thin. He pulls the financial records apart. Not the ones Choi showed him, the actual syndicate records, the master accounts, the ledgers that no one sees without his authorization. He looks at the transfers. He traces the origination points. He follows the thread backward through 4 shell accounts and 2 jurisdictional gaps and arrives, with the cold patience of a man who has done this before, at a point of origin. The account that funded the transfers registered under Ada's name was itself funded from an account linked to a holding company called Bakwa Partners. Bakwa Partners was incorporated 3 years ago. One of its directors is a man named Director Choi. Junho sits with this information in the same way he sat with the folder earlier, not reading it again, because he doesn't need to. Simply allowing the understanding to arrive fully, to fill the space it requires. He has known Choi for 11 years. He trusted him the way he trusts anything in his world, provisionally with evidence, with the constant background calculation of incentive and risk. He had thought Choi's incentives were aligned with the syndicate. He had miscalculated where Choi's ambitions ended. He makes 3 phone calls. He does not raise his voice in any of them. He asks for very specific things in the particular way that makes clear these are not requests. Then, he begins the second part of the investigation, which is the part he has been avoiding because it requires him to feel something. He pulls everything on Kang Junho. Not the syndicate files, those he knows. The personal files. The things their family's estate attorney has been holding in a sealed folder for 5 years. Miho's accounts, his travels, his correspondence. The records of a life that Junho was not entirely present for because by the time Miho reached his 20s, Junho was already the man in the glass office, and the glass keeps things out as effectively as it keeps things in. He finds the Lagos trip, the return trips, 4 of them, at intervals that now, reading the dates backward, align precisely with the early months of Ada's marriage. He finds a name registered on a lease for a small apartment in Mapogu, Adaeze Okafor Kang. The marriage certificate, which he somehow never knew existed. He finds a bank transfer Miho made 6 weeks before he died, a significant sum, to a children's trust account registered in a name the attorney had noted as for future beneficiary unborn. His brother had known. His brother had been planning, had been building something. The beginning of the architecture of a life that included a child, a wife, a future that had nothing to do with the syndicate and everything to do with that warm place he'd promised to live someday. He had not told Junho. Junho sits with this for a long time. The city outside his window does its indifferent glittering. The orchid on the windowsill, white, replaced, exactly as he requested, does not comment. He thinks about a 9-year-old boy in a too large sweater, making a table from cardboard, setting it like a proper dinner. He thinks about the promise he never made. He goes to the apartment Thursday evening with no prior announcement, which is an uncharacteristic lapse in the discipline he applies to every other aspect of his life. Ada opens the door in a sweatshirt and bare feet, her hair down for the first time he has ever seen it, and she looks so different from his executive secretary that for a full second neither of them speaks. He is holding a bag from the pharmacy. She is holding a spatula. "You should have called," she says. "I know." She steps back anyway. The apartment is orderly in the particular way of someone who maintains order under difficult circumstances. Not pristine, but intentional. Zoe has decorated approximately 40% of the available surface area with drawings. There is a drawing on the refrigerator, 2 on the living room wall, 1 taped to the window that, held up against the evening light, turns out to be a portrait of a tall figure with a serious face, and, incongruously, a flower. Junho looks at it. "That's you," Zoe says from behind him. She has materialized silently, the way 5-year-olds do. "I gave you a flower because you have one in your office." He looks at the flower in the drawing, round, imprecise, unmistakably cheerful. Then, at the orchid, he orders replaced every 10 days because the dying ones bother him in a way he cannot explain. "Thank you," he says. This is not a thing he says often. He says it like someone using a muscle that doesn't get much exercise, carefully, aware of the effort. Zoe beams at him and runs back to the couch. Ada is watching this from the kitchen doorway. She has the expression of someone watching a situation she doesn't know how to categorize. Not suspicious, not warm, but alert in the way she is always alert, collecting data. "I brought fever medicine," Junho says, holding up the pharmacy bag. "And vitamins." And he looks in the bag, "These." He produces a package of animal crackers. He is not entirely sure why he bought the animal crackers. The impulse arrived at the pharmacy checkout without warning. Ada looks at the animal crackers. "She doesn't have a fever," Ada says. "I know. I brought them preemptively." "A beet." "Come in," Ada says. "I made jollof rice." "There's enough." He stays for 2 hours. They eat at the small kitchen table, Ada and Junho across from each other, Zoe between them in the chair she is clearly designated as hers, judging by the drawing taped to its back. Zoe carries most of the conversation, which is a mercy, because the conversation between Junho and Ada in Zoe's absence would be a different kind of conversation entirely, heavy with the things neither of them has said, with the information he now has and has not yet shared, with the particular gravity of 2 adults who are becoming aware that they are in the process of falling into something. After dinner, Zoe falls asleep on the couch with her head on a pillow shaped like a cloud. Ada covers her with a blanket. Junho watches from the kitchen doorway with his hands in his pockets. "She drew you a flower," Ada says quietly, so as not to wake her. "I noticed. She doesn't draw flowers for people she doesn't like." "How many people does she like?" Ada considers. "About 7. She's selective." A pause. "She has her father's face." "I know," Junho says. "I saw it immediately." They look at each other across the sleeping child. Outside, Seoul at night does its brilliant, complicated thing, indifferent as ever. Inside, in the particular quiet of the apartment, something is happening between them that has no name yet. It is not love, not exactly. It is the thing before love, the thing that is clearing the ground. "I'll tell you what I've found," Junho says. "But not tonight." Ada nods. She doesn't ask. She has learned over 2 years when he means not yet versus when he means not ever, and these are completely different things. He leaves at 9. At the door, he pauses. "The jollof rice was good," he says. Ada looks at him. "That's the most human thing you've ever said to me." Something in his face, very briefly, does what might be a smile. Then he leaves, and Ada stands at the closed door for a moment, and puts her hand flat against it, and doesn't examine why. A week passes. Junho moves his investigation forward with a quiet, systematic thoroughness of a man who is also, in some parallel track of his consciousness, trying not to think about a drawing with a flower on it. He builds a full picture of Choi's operation, not just the manufactured evidence against Ada, but the whole architecture underneath it. Choi has been positioning for 18 months. Small moves, careful ones. Cultivating loyalty in key department heads, redirecting minor revenue streams, building relationships with outside factions that should have been off-limits. The play against Ada was the most recent move and the most aggressive, designed to remove someone who, as Junho now understands, both a threat to Choi's plans and a key to something Choi had discovered before Junho had. Choi had found out about Zoe. Not everything, not the full significance, but enough that the executive secretary's dead husband had been Kang Miho, that the child was Miho's daughter, that in the absence of any direct heirs the syndicate succession would become a question of the board's choosing. Choi wanted to be the board's choice. Ada's presence, and Zoe's, once the connection became clear, threatened that ambition in ways that Choi had apparently decided were unacceptable. Junho works late. Ada has been brought back into the building, quietly, through a side entrance, with a revised security profile that Choi does not know about. She works in a secondary office, not her usual desk, and she is doing what she is best at, rebuilding a financial record from the ground up, tracing anomalies, reconstructing the path of money that was never supposed to be found. On a Wednesday at 11 p.m., Junho appears in the doorway of her office with 2 cups of coffee. Ada looks up. She has been working for 14 hours. Her hair is escaping whatever she put it in this morning. There are 3 empty water bottles on the desk and a takeout container that has clearly been empty for a while. "You're still here," she says. "So are you." He sets one of the coffees beside her keyboard and takes the chair across the desk without being invited. She watches him do this, watches him inhabit the space with the ease of a man who has never had to wonder whether he belongs somewhere, and something in her chest does a thing she firmly does not acknowledge. "I found the origination," she says, turning her screen toward him. "The account they used to fund the fake transfers. It's a holding company, Baekwa Partners." Junho looks at the screen. "I know," he says. Ada is quiet for a moment. "You already know. I found it 3 days ago. And you didn't tell me. I needed to know how far it went before I told you." He looks at her. "I needed to be certain about something before I had that conversation." "Certain about what?" A pause. "Whether you were safe here. Whether I could protect." He stops. Recalibrates. "Whether the situation was stable enough that telling you wouldn't accelerate things before I was ready to move." Ada studies him. She is good at studying people. It is part of what makes her excellent at her job, and what she sees in him now is something she has only glimpsed before in fragments. The man underneath the architecture. The one who carries things without mentioning them. "Choi," she says. "Choi." She absorbs this. "He found out about Zoe." "Yes." "That's why he wanted me gone." "Yes." Ada looks at the screen. At the numbers she has spent 14 hours reconstructing. She thinks about what it means that a man she has worked alongside for 2 years, who has brought her coffee and asked after her daughter and sat in meetings beside her while she took notes, arranged for her professional destruction because her child was inconvenient to his plans. "What are you going to do?" she says. "What needs to be done?" He says this the way he says everything, flatly, completely, with a certainty that is not arrogance, but simply the statement of a man who does not doubt his own capability. "But not tonight." "Then why are you here at 11 o'clock? He is quiet for a moment. "Then, I didn't want you to be here alone." Ada looks at him. He looks back. "Drink your coffee," he says. "Show me what you found." They work until nearly 2 in the morning, side by side over her screen, their voices low and professional and undercut by something that has nothing to do with work. At some point Ada falls asleep mid-sentence, her head dropping forward, and Junho sits back and looks at her. This woman who has held her ground through a frame-up and a near-firing and the discovery that her dead husband's family runs a criminal empire and she is currently hiding in their office, and he takes off his jacket and puts it over her shoulders and sits there a moment longer than he needs to before he leaves. He does not examine this. He examines it extensively on the drive home. Zoe gets sick on a Friday, which is the kind of thing that happens to parents without regard for the larger dramatic circumstances of their lives. It is a mild fever, Nothing alarming, the ordinary small disaster of childhood, but Ada is alone in the apartment and the pharmacy is 2 blocks away and Zoe is asking for juice and the juice is gone. And Ada is doing the particular math of single parenthood, which is the math of impossible simultaneity, when her phone rings. She answers without looking. How is she? Junho says. Ada stops. How do you know she's sick? I called the apartment to check in and she answered. She told me she had a temperature and that her head felt like it was full of cotton. A pause. She also told me you were out of juice and that you looked tired. Ada puts her hand over her eyes for a moment. Stay there, Junho says. I'll come. You don't have to. I know. The phone disconnects. He arrives 40 minutes later with juice. 3 different kinds, apparently uncertain which she preferred. Children's fever medication, throat lozenges, and an ungainly stuffed bear that looks like it was purchased from a pharmacy display in a state of slight panic. Zoe is delighted by the bear. She names it Junho immediately, which produces an expression on the actual Junho's face that Ada has to turn away from because she is not yet ready for what looking at it directly would mean. You bought her a stuffed animal? Ada says in the kitchen, quiet, while Zoe introduces the bear to her other toys in the living room.
The pharmacy had them.
He sets the juice on the counter. She looked like she might want one. She already has 12 stuffed animals. 13 now. Ada looks at him. He looks back with a particular expression he has, not quite guarded, not quite open, occupying that precise middle distance that she has spent 2 years learning to read and is only now understanding she has been reading wrong. She thought it was control. She is beginning to think it is something else, the face of a person who has forgotten how to let himself want things, and is in the early stages of remembering. Why are you here, Junho? She says. And I don't mean tonight. I mean all of it. The apartment visits, the coffee at 11, staying while I worked. She says it without accusation, with genuine inquiry. You're investigating what Choi did. You've decided Zoe is Miho's daughter. You don't need to. She stops, chooses the words carefully. Be here. In this way. For any of that to proceed. He is quiet for long enough that she thinks he might not answer. He does this, takes the full measure of a question before he responds, never performing contemplation, but actually doing it. No, he says finally. I don't need to. The silence between them is a live thing. I want to stop eating alone, he says. Very quietly. Like a man reading something aloud that he has been keeping in a locked room for a long time. Ada does not speak. I have been eating alone for 5 years, he continues. Since Miho. I didn't decide to. It just became the shape of things. He looks at his hands, which is something he almost never does. She walked into my office in a yellow coat and told me I looked like her father, and I understood, for the first time in 5 years, that there was still someone who needed to be found. Ada is looking at him. Her expression is doing something complicated. I know this is not simple, he says. I know what I am. I know what my world is. I'm not asking you to. Junho. Her voice is very quiet. I have been working for you for 2 years. I know. I know what you are. I have always known. She meets his eyes. I'm still here. From the living room, Zoe's voice. Mama. Bear Junho wants some juice too. Ada and the actual Junho look at each other. Something in his face does the thing she has been waiting for, genuine, unguarded, unmistakable. Not quite a smile, closer to a thaw. I'll get the juice, he says. It is a Tuesday, which is an ordinary day to be frightened. Ada is at the apartment, Zoe at the kindergarten down the street. A routine Junho security team knows and has been quietly monitoring. Ada is working on her laptop when she hears the sound she has been trained by 2 years in the orbit of the Kang Syndicate to classify correctly, the wrong kind of silence. The kind that happens when someone is in a hallway being careful. She moves without thinking. Laptop closed, phone in hand, out the back corridor the way Junho showed her when he first set up the apartment. Not because I expect anything, he'd said, in the way of a man who always expects something, and down the service stairs and out onto the street. She calls Junho before she reaches the corner. One word. They came. A pause on the line. When he speaks, his voice is exactly the same as always, steady, without any upward pitch of alarm, but she has learned to hear the thing underneath it now, the current beneath the surface. Are you out of the building? Yes. Zoe. At school. Safe. Good. The word lands completely, like a stone placed deliberately. Don't go back for anything. I'm sending a car. Ada stands on the sidewalk in November Seoul, her laptop bag on her shoulder and nothing else, and she watches an ordinary Tuesday go about its business around her. People with grocery bags, a man walking a small dog, a woman on a phone call, all the ordinary dailiness of a city that does not know what is happening 2 buildings over, in an apartment where men sent by Director Choi are discovering that the woman they came for is already gone. She is afraid, which is reasonable. She is also something else which is harder to name, but feels like clarity. Like the moment when something that has been building for a long time finally arrives, and the not knowing is over, and what remains is the shape of the thing itself. Choi has made his move. Junho will make his. The car arrives in 7 minutes. There is a particular quality to the way Kang Junho handles a crisis that his enemies have, by the time they understand it, already lost. It is not speed, though he is fast when speed is required. It is not force, though he has access to all the force that matters. It is sequence. He understands that most situations, even violent ones, are simply problems of sequencing. In the right order, with the right information applied at the right point of leverage, almost any structure can be dismantled before it knows it's falling. He has been ready for Choi for 72 hours. He has been building the sequence since the moment he traced the origination of the fake transfer to Baekwa Partners. What remained was the trigger, confirmation that Choi had moved from conspiracy to action. Ada's phone call is the trigger. The first call goes to the Syndicate's head of security, not Choi's man. One of the 3 department heads Junho has already quietly verified are still his. 3 sentences. The men at the apartment are identified, detained, and removed from the situation within 20 minutes. The second call goes to the Syndicate's financial director. Again, verified loyalty. 4 sentences. Every account, access credential, and authorization linked to Director Choi is frozen. By the time Choi receives the notification, the window for moving money or assets will have already closed. The third call goes to a man Junho describes only as an attorney, though from the nature of the conversation, it is clear the attorney handles things that most attorneys do not handle. Documents are prepared. Evidence is compiled. Not just the Baekwa connection, but the full 18 months of Choi's positioning, organized into a file that is much tidier, much more damning, and much more difficult to manufacture doubts about than the file Choi built against Ada. The fourth call Junho makes himself, to Director Choi's personal line. My office, he says. Now. He does not explain. He does not warn. He does not give Choi time to calculate, which is the point. Choi is a man who calculates well when given time to do so, and so Junho removes the time. The meeting is brief. Choi arrives to find Junho behind his desk and the full financial record of Baekwa Partners spread across the surface in front of him, organized with the methodical clarity of a man who has thought about this moment for many days and wants it to be unambiguous. There is also a legal document and a recorder. Choi looks at the desk. He looks at Junho. He makes the calculation that a man in his position makes when he understands, reading a room, that the game is already over and what remains is the question of how it ends. The recorder is not running yet, Junho says. It will run when I choose. What happens before that depends on what you say in the next 2 minutes. What Choi says in the next 2 minutes is everything Junho already knows, confirmed, with certain additional details that are useful for the record. He is thorough. He is not dramatic about it. He has the particular manner of a man who has spent many years in the business of pragmatic decisions and understands that this is simply one more. Junho turns on the recorder when it is time. When it is done, Choi is escorted from the building by 2 men who are not unkind about it, because Junho does not require them to be unkind. The document on the desk, a full and complete transfer of Choi's authority, assets, and syndicate position, is signed. Junho sits alone in his office for a moment after Choi leaves. He thinks about Miho, about the 18 months that Choi spent building his play, about the fact that some of those months overlapped with the months when Miho was alive, was in Lagos, was sending money to an account for an unborn child. About whether Choi knew then, and if he did, whether that knowledge intersected, in any way, with the road accident that Junho has never entirely believed was an accident. He doesn't have proof. He may never have proof. This is one of the things he is going to have to carry for the rest of his life, in the place where the certainties end. He stands. He straightens his jacket. He goes to find Ada. Zoe is coloring at the table in the conference room Junho has temporarily converted to a space where she can exist safely while the rest of the building reconfigures itself around the new order of things. She has taken over approximately half of the table with what appears to be an ambitious artistic project involving every color in a set of markers that appeared on the table approximately 30 minutes after Junho made a single phone call to his assistant. Ada is at the other end of the table, watching Zoe and not watching her at the same time, the particular bifocal attention of a parent in a difficult situation, half present in the room and half somewhere else, running calculations. Junho opens the door. Zoe looks up immediately. "Junho," she says, with the unqualified delight she extends to people who have earned it, which is a short list but apparently includes him.
Hey, he says.
This is not a word he uses often. He is learning new words. He sits across from Ada. Between them, Zoe returns to her drawing with the focused serenity of a child who has decided that the adult situation is under control and she can return to her primary concerns. "It's done," Junho says. Ada looks at him. "Choi." "Yes." "And the men who came to the apartment." "Handled. You can go back whenever you want. Or don't. The apartment is yours for as long as you need it." Ada is quiet. Junho watches her face, which is doing a number of things at once, relief and exhaustion, and something more complicated, the face of a person standing on the other side of a very long and difficult passage and trying to understand what the new landscape looks like.
"What happens now?" she says.
For Zoe. He takes a breath. "I'd like to recognize her formally. As Miho's daughter. With your permission, entirely with your permission, I'd like her to carry the Kang name." He pauses. "It comes with certain protections. And certain complications. I won't pretend otherwise. I know what the name means."
"Yes."
"I know you know." He looks at his hands, that rare gesture. What it also means is that she wouldn't be alone. That there would be a family, such as it is, such as I am. Ada looks at Zoe, who has completed what appears to be a portrait of the Kang Syndicate conference room populated entirely by animals. "She already loves you," Ada says. "I don't think she particularly requires a formal document for that." "No," Junho agrees. "She doesn't, but I'll think about the name." Ada meets his eyes. "I'll think about all of it. That's all I'm asking." A silence. Not an uncomfortable one. The kind of silence that happens between people who have said the important things and are simply sitting with them. "Junho," Ada says. "Yes." "What do you want?" "Not for Zoe. Not for the succession. Not for the syndicate." She holds his gaze. "For yourself. What do you actually want?" He looks at her for a long moment. "I want to stop eating alone," he says. Again. The same words as before, but with something different in them now. Less confessional, more declarative. Less a door being opened, and more a direction being chosen. Ada looks at him. Then she reaches across the table and takes his hand. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't need to. Zoe looks up from her drawing. She looks at their hands. She looks at Junho's face. She looks at Ada's face. She makes the assessment of a 5-year-old who has very good instincts. "Good," she says. Then she returns to the animals. It is 3 weeks later. The world has not been made simple. It does not simplify, in his world, and Ada knew this when she chose to stay in it. There are still the daily mechanics of the syndicate, the restructuring left in Choi's wake, the 1,000 small and large complications of a life spent navigating the particular geography of power. There are still the nights when Ada watches him from across a room and remembers, with the clarity of someone who has never been sentimental about reality, exactly what he is and what that means. She stays anyway. This is the choice, not dramatic, not announced, not the subject of a conversation they have ever explicitly had. It is simply the accumulating evidence of her continued presence, and of his, and of the way they have begun to occupy each other's orbits with a naturalness that still, sometimes, surprises them both. Zoe, for her part, has taken the entire situation in stride with the philosophical resilience of a child who has grown up with uncertainty and learned to find her footing in it. She calls him Junho. She draws him with flowers. She introduces him to people as Mama's Junho, which is inaccurate and also, depending on your perspective, entirely accurate. Tonight it is the three of them. Junho's apartment, which has, over the past weeks, acquired several of Zoe's drawings on the walls, a set of children's dishes in the kitchen cabinet, and a stuffed cloud on the couch, is warm in the way spaces become warm when they are lived in by people who are choosing to live in them. He is making ramen. It is the first time in 5 years. He stands at the stove in his kitchen and cracks 2 eggs directly into the broth and slices the green onion thin, and his hands remember the motion the way bodies remember things the mind has tried to let go of, and it is not painful. Not the way he expected. It is something else, something more like recognition. The particular feeling of a thing restored. Zoe is on the kitchen floor. She has made a table out of a cardboard box she found somewhere and set it with her 3 plastic animal dishes. She is explaining to Bear Junho, who is propped against a cabinet with the dignified resignation of a stuffed animal who has accepted his circumstances, the correct way to set a table. Ada is leaning against the kitchen doorframe, watching both of them. Her arms are folded, her hair is down. She is wearing socks with cartoon characters on them that she does not appear to have any self-consciousness about. She has the expression of a woman who is looking at something she was not certain she was allowed to want and has decided, quietly and completely, to want it anyway. Junho stirs the pot. He is aware of her watching. He has become very aware, over the past weeks, of the specific quality of her attention, the way it lands differently than other people's attention, specific and warm and without performance. It smells good, Ada says. It's just ramen. I know what it is. He turns briefly, looks at her. She raises an eyebrow at him, which is something she does, a small, particular thing that functions as an entire sentence. It says, I see you. The whole of you. The orphan boy, at the stove, and the man with the glass office, and everything in between. I see you, and I'm still here. He turns back to the stove. Dinner's ready, he says. They sit on the kitchen floor because Zoe has established the cardboard table and it would be absurd, she explains, for the table to go unused. Junho, who has eaten every meal for the past 5 years in a dining room designed for a much larger and much lonelier version of himself, folds himself onto the kitchen floor without complaint and accepts the plastic bowl Zoe places in front of him with the solemnity of a child presiding over a ceremony. Ada sits across from him. Zoe is between them, already talking, a story about something that happened at kindergarten, involving a dispute over the red paint, which she is narrating with considerable dramatic energy. Junho listens. He listens the way he has always listened, completely, without pretense. But there is something different in it now. Something has been put back into its place. Some frequency that went silent 5 years ago has returned, low and steady, underneath everything else, like a note you don't notice until you realize you'd been missing it. The bowl is warm. Across the cardboard table, Ada catches his eye over the top of Zoe's head. She is doing the thing with her expression again, the thing that is not quite a smile, but is the felt presence of one, the warmth behind the precision, the woman behind the executive secretary. She raises her eyebrow again. He holds her gaze. And for the first time in 5 years, quiet, specific, real, Kang Junho smiles. Zoe looks up from her bowl, sees this, and nods with great satisfaction. I knew, she says, that you just needed a table.